say India is a country that has democracy and free speech?
I think it's a country of over 1 billion people that's very complicated, but I think it's really trying, and it's the civil society is very active, and you can criticize it in a million different ways, but you can criticize any country like that in a million different ways. And what they've managed to accomplish, given the incredible aggression on their borders, is a real testament to the Indian people. I was at that conference, and I have no idea what the religions or whatever of the participants were. They just all wanted to work towards a better, stronger, more democratic India. So considering that in 1947, they were left broken into 500 different princely estates and totally all the richness that could be carried, taken away. What they've accomplished in that amount of time is remarkable. Story isn't over, but you can't compare them to countries that haven't had that happen to them. You can compare them to other countries that did and see how far they've come. I think, if I was a young person, I'd much prefer to be a young person in India than in many, many other countries. I think my ability to craft my own future and fulfill my potential in many cases is much higher. I mean, especially compared to its neighbors, all different directions. But the point is that India wants to lead on these issues, right? It wants to, in its G20 role, deliver more prosperity for the poor, more opportunities for its business sectors, more education, more health, all those sorts of things. And that's not a rhetoric that I see being enacted by countries we think of in the West. I mean, the president of Croatia didn't show up and say, let's work together to build businesses so that your poor can lift themselves up out of poverty and get better educations and all that sort of stuff. She said, why aren't you helping us on Ukraine? Now, Ukraine is incredibly important, and Russia shouldn't. What Russia did was absolutely wrong. But what all of this is about is the perception in non-Western countries about what's going on in the West and what's going on in China and how they're going to find a way through that. Does this make any sense?
It does to me. Well, so if, China obviously has a coherent plan for global domination, and they're very successful. In a lot of ways, it does seem like the West, and particularly the United States, is fractured. If, the West, if the U.S. fails at countering China, for example, allows Taiwan to be invaded and taken, is there any hope that India, on its own or in some kind of coalition with other countries, would they be able to stand up to a Chinese threat?
They will try. Unless there's, it's a democracy, and China's targets the democratic processes in other countries. So one of the newspaper stories, for example, that was out while I was there was about an embassy, a non-NATO European country's embassy in Delhi. It was Ukraine. I mean, there was no other opinion. That was hosting, according to the report, and I know the reporter, and he's very good, that was hosting meetings of non-resident Indians and other Europeans to try to put together an information campaign to defeat Modi at the next election because of India's position on Ukraine. Okay, so if the goal is regime change in India because you don't like Prime Minister Modi's position on Ukraine and you're willing to get in whoever you want, whoever will tell you what you want to hear on Ukraine, then what you want is a compliant government. And in my experience, if they're compliant to you, they'll be compliant to whoever pays a bit more than you or whoever's rougher than you, right? Which is why this whole, approach in the Pacific Islands of dealing with compromised leaders doesn't work, because the Chinese are they're tougher than you and they've got more money than you. So if the goals are that narrow and you try to do that kind of a thing, and you get a different government in place in India, then I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, though, given the U.S. and particularly the CIA's experience with regime change in, say, South America, I would say, like, why not try our hand in India?
To what end?
I think Matt's trying to joke and it's not coming off.
All right. So, hey, no, we're done with that, Matt. Spray bottle. So this is interesting because you brought up the Pacific Islands, and I know part of your tour was also in the North Pacific. And what we see there is sort of a similar thing with what you're talking about with India, where they are also under a very immense threat from the Chinese Communist Party, but also the West, and in particular America, has failed them terribly. So this is a similar situation. What are these countries and peoples talking about when they're stuck between, it's the opposite of an immovable object and an unstoppable force. It's something that's completely weak and falling apart, and then something that's coming to eat them.
So this is this thing about who is leading the world on fighting for democracy and human rights and things. And you're seeing it across the Pacific. Like, there are all of these leaders that are standing up and risking their personal safety because they actually believe in these ideals. And the main one now is David Panuelo, the president of the Federated States of Micronesia, who wrote this incredible letter that everybody should read. And in fact, there was a committee hearing recently, and Representative Brad Sherman entered it into the record and said every world leader should read this letter. It's 13 pages long, and the whole first section of it, he details and he calls it political warfare and gray zone activity in his country. And he names the Chinese diplomats and what they've been doing, and talks about how he's been personally threatened, he's followed, but also how they're funding independence movements within his country to break up the country. How he didn't want to send a representative to a certain meeting sponsored by China, so China selected one of the citizens of his country and brought him to the meeting and said he was a representative of the entire country, completely bypassing the normal political process.
Smooth.
Yeah. How he actually, China wanted to send an ambassador to his country that he knew was an intel agent, basically. And so he refused that ambassador. And China's just sitting around waiting for him to lose the election so that they can send that ambassador. And he did lose the election. And so that ambassador will be coming and sitting in the capital of Federated States of Micronesia. But it's everything that you've kind of heard rumors about, but the president of a country is saying, yeah, this is exactly what's happening. And he goes through it all. And then at the end, he says, and that's why I want to de-recognize China and recognize Taiwan.
That hasn't happened
since
right?
2007. And he says it's to protect my country and my people and to get us away from the PRC, which wants to undermine our values and buy off our politicians for their own best interest. And in the letter, he talks about politicians coming back with envelopes full of cash and all this. I mean, it's a plea from a Pacific island to be liberated from an aggressive Asian power, right? This is the political warfare equivalent of World War II. And he says that we can't just pull off from China because it'll leave these huge holes in the budget. So there's money involved. the amounts of money, and he says it in the letter. He puts it all out there. He says, look, we need 50 million over 3 years, and then the provinces need this amount. And I mean, the amounts are...
50 million is so tiny from the perspective of, like, the U.S., for example.
Yeah.
It's like, we're spending, $1 billion on, a new bomber plane or an aircraft carrier or something.
That's probably fuel for the bomber plane.
Yeah.
Like for an hour.
So it's just
literally the money being burned as fuel.
That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's what they're asking is so small.
Yeah, and it's completely transparent. There's nothing going into anybody's pocket. And he says he's spoken to the Taiwanese foreign minister about it, spoke to Wu about it, and he said that the Taiwanese would complete the projects that China had started. They started a stadium and all that stuff, and the Taiwanese would complete it and hire locals. So that's a bit extra money, but it's not that much. This letter came out on March 9th, and nothing's happened.